Awesome. Well, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon to wherever you may be. My name is Christian Arana. I am the Vice President of Civic Power and Policy at the Latino Community Foundation. I want to welcome everyone here today for this very important conversation. Before we get into the programming, I just want to make a note for if you need Spanish language translation. So I'm going to ask our translators to come off mute and provide instructions on how to help us to do that.
Thank you so much. Buenos días o buenas tardes a todos. Bienvenidos a su asamblea virtual. Queremos darles instrucciones de cómo.
So I believe the translation should have already been started. So if you need translation, it should be at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. So if you want to just turn that on, you should be able to provide it there. If not, the chat is also there in the function now. Okay, great. People can hear it now. So thank you to our translation team for jumping on. Carl, if you can move to the next slide, please. Before I turn it over to our CEO, who will then introduce the panelists, we just wanted to just provide a basic civics education as to what the census is. For many of you who may not know what the census is, first of all, I just want to commend you for jumping on at a 9 a.m. on a Tuesday morning to learn more about this issue, understand why it matters, and what you can do about it in the lead up into the next census. So the census is something that happens every 10 years in our country. It is something that is written into the United States Constitution. And basically, at its core, what it says is that every 10 years in this nation, we will count every single person and every single household that lives in our country. What we do with that information is actually something very profound. From that count is how states and localities receive federal resources, right? For things like schools, for roads, for hospitals. I often joke with a lot of people that whatever your issue may be, the census is directly tied to that and how much money your community can basically get, literally just depending on how many people live in that community. On the other hand, the census is how actually we get political representation. So, if X number of people live in the state of California or in the state of Arizona or New York or Florida or Illinois, depending on what that count is how many seats your state will get in the U.S. House of Representatives. And as you know, the job of a U.S. Congress member right now is so critically important, voting on things around immigration, around healthcare, around housing, right now around issues of foreign policy, right? Whether or not this country can go to war, right? Those people have direct impact and influence over these decisions. And part of what our responsibility is making sure that we maximize our political representation just by the sheer virtue of just counting every 10 years. As you'll see on the screen, this isn't chump change, as I like to say. This is trillions of dollars we're talking about. This is really important political representation that we're talking about. And so, we'll have the panel go more directly as to why this matters. But as I mentioned, this is something that is just so important that happens in our nation every 10 years. And, we wanted to start this conversation as early as possible to get you informed, get you activated, and hopefully you'll leave this conversation with a lot of takeaways for how you can engage on this issue in your community. So with that, I want to turn it over to our CEO of the Latino Community Foundation, Julian Castro, who also provides some additional remarks and then introduce our panel. Julian?
Thanks a lot, Christian. I really want to say thank you for putting this together and to the entire LCF team. When I was young and growing up in San Antonio, I remember so many times seeing the population signs, the city limit signs that all of us see in whatever town we live in. And when I was growing up in the 80s back then, I think that the population number on that sign, the city limit sign, said something like 723,000 some odd number of people. And when I was a kid, I always thought, wow, why is it so specific? Why does it matter that it has exactly how many people live in this city? And then later, when I served on the San Antonio City Council and served as mayor, and then when I got to work with a lot of cities at HUD, I found out exactly why it mattered. why a population count that we call the census makes such a profound difference to communities all throughout the country. And that's what we're going to talk about today, why it's so important, why it matters, and why it's so essential that all of our communities are prepared for the next census. As Christian mentioned, not only does it impact how many representatives a state has in Congress, it also affects everything from education and transit funding to uh, health funding, health outcomes, and basically people's economic mobility and quality of life and health outcomes are in one way or another impacted by that count. We also know that headed into the next census, there are really significant challenges that may present themselves to getting a full and accurate count that go above and beyond even the ones that we've seen in the past. We're going to have a fantastic conversation about all of that with just an exemplary group of panelists, and I want to introduce them now, starting with our Latino Community Foundation board member, but more importantly for this conversation, the former director of the United States Census under President Biden, Robert Santos. Robert, I want to thank you for joining us. We also have Diane Ortiz, the CEO of Youth Alliance, which is a youth serving organization on the central coast of California that has been involved in trying to make sure that people get counted in that area and has partnered with LCF in the past. I also want to welcome Don Chen, the president of the CERDNA Foundation. CERDNA has been intimately involved in helping to make sure that we get an accurate count by funding efforts and partnering with organizations. They're right in the middle of that. And last but definitely not least, Maya Wiley, a good friend and president and CEO of the Leadership Conference on Human and Civil Rights, one of our nation's longstanding and premier civil rights organizations. Maya, thank you for joining us. Robert, I wanted to start out with you. You served as census director, and so you know this very well. I wanted to ask if you could just start off by talking to us about what's happening right now. What is the Census Bureau doing in 2026 to get ready for the 2030 census? If you could give us some insight into that, and then perhaps talk a little bit about how you think it's different right now going into the next census than perhaps it was in previous census efforts.
Okay, well, thank you. And I'm honored to be here and a part of this really important discussion. Uh, right now, the Census Bureau is in the midst of a 10-year process to prepare for the 2030 decennial census. It started actually with the end of the 2020 census, where there were a number of activities like something called the post-enumeration survey, which was used to measure which households were counted and which ones weren't, the sources of the overcounts and undercounts. And it's why we know, for example, that Latinos were heavily undercounted in the 2020 census. And it serves as a basis upon which then to do research over the course of, say, 5 years, leading up to now, where there is going to be a decennial census test, the 2026 test, that is starting in 2 weeks on May 1st. So there's a lot of research that goes on between, like in the first 5 years of a decade, leading up to an operational test, which is mid-decade, and in this case, it's in May of 2026. And then we'll continue with the results of that, with improvements or adjustments, leading up to a dress rehearsal in year 8 or 9. Associated with that are all the preparations and plans and challenges that come with such a large operation, including how to go about hiring over 200,000 people as enumerators, the largest civilian mobilization in our nation's history every 10 years that occurs. So there is much going on. There is much yet to do. And right now, the real challenge is that we are being faced as a country with preparing for a decennial census with extreme staff shortages at the Census Bureau and more generally in the federal statistical system, as well as budgetary reductions. So the 2026 test, for example, was originally designed to capture the full diversity of our beautifully diverse nation, with sites all over the U.S., including in tribal lands, in colonias along the Texas border, on the West Coast, etc. And it's now been reduced to two sites, one in North Carolina and one in South Carolina. So that is a huge challenge and something that needs to be addressed. Historically, the Census Bureau has had overcounts and undercounts, but overall, as a nation, the population's been relatively accurately counted. But it came only because the overcounting of certain populations counteracted or canceled out the undercounting of Latinos, African Americans, people on tribal lands, and others populations, people in rural areas. So it's really, really important to make sure that we do all that we can as a community to help get out the count, to help people get counted. You know, the under my directorship, I prioritize community engagement because the one thing I wanted to do was to make sure that the Census Bureau and the nation understood the value of community engagement as the superpower. It is what allows civic engagement to occur and people to participate. Without community engagement in the decennial census process, there would be a even worse accuracy in the census. We need that. We need to come together as Latinos, and we need to get out the count. So I think I'll go ahead and stop there and
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that, Robert. And to pick up on that point about community engagement, because all of us, I remember, in 1980, my mom was one of those folks that worked briefly on the census, trying to go door to door and and I think my uncle too. And I mean, it's a community-wide effort, but it takes even more than that. It takes preparing the community, as you say, this engagement. Which is a great segue to what I wanted to ask you about, Diane. You are part of Youth Action, or you lead Youth Action. Y'all were part of this historic effort in California, partnering with many different organizations. LCF was proud to be a part of it for the last census that helped create a historic 69% self-response rate in the state. And could you talk to us about that effort that you were really involved in, and then what you see right now and how you're preparing as we head toward the 2030 census?
Yeah, thank you. Good morning. So happy to be here with you. When I got the invitation from LCF, I said, "Wow, talking about census already?" And then as I started digging through it,
yeah.
Right. It was like, this is absolutely the right time to be talking about the 2030 census. And so I just want to say thank you for elevating this conversation, for bringing us all together to talk about this. My name is Diane Ortiz. I'm the founder and CEO of Youth Alliance. We're based in the beautiful Central Coast and South Santa Clara County area, Bay Area of California. And I think a little bit of context is helpful because our community in San Benito County is tucked away in between very large areas, but we're rural, primarily agricultural, very spread out. We have very limited infrastructure as far as the county infrastructure. So the Youth Alliance has been working very deeply in communities for the last 30 years. And what that means is that when we were asked by San Benito County to participate and help them lead the census, they said we have $50,000 for the county to help with this outreach. And we're like, okay, we have already known that the money is limited. We cannot staff our way to win, right? Organizing is boots on the ground. It's connection. It is about working with community. And so when we started this work in 2019, we already knew that we had a long road ahead of us, but we were able to not only increase our response rate by over 3% in our community, we exceeded the state of California's response rate to 70.8%. And we did that very strategically by working with our trusted partners, with promotoras. It was a multi-generational effort. And this was the beautiful part of the census outreach at a time that we know we had Trump 1.0 as the first administration, and then we had the pandemic. So the context was already in crisis. There was already public distrust. There was already fear about public charge. In 2019, he had already put out the question about the citizenship question. So we knew that our work was really about building confidence in working with trusted messengers, working with trusted people, that when they gather together and we help them look at the census, that we were able to answer their questions and help, quell their fears. But really what it was, the picture that you see behind me is Belen and her son. She is a mom that has worked with Youth Alliance as a promotora for many, many years as an organizer, and she speaks Triqui. She is a trusted messenger in her community. So how we worked to elevate the message is we took the national conversation and the infrastructure, then the California infrastructure, and then brought it down to the regional basis, and then made the messaging hyper local, meaning it was Belen's face, it was her voice, it was those folks, those moms canvassing with wagons full of kids, with a very visible t-shirts showing Youth Alliance, knocking on doors, those messages, the videos on YouTube, all of that local messaging was done with local visible leaders, not politicians, local neighborhood leaders, school leaders, others reaching out. And one of the things that I think was extremely valuable in the way that we did our work was not only the multi-generational aspect. We worked in providing curriculum in the after-school programs where young people were educating their parents about the census, about the importance of bringing resources for their kids, for special education, for power, for making sure that the community was investing in the future and in the generations to come. I would say that one of the most pivotal parts of the work that we did is when the pandemic hit, we had to switch our outreach efforts. It became very digital because, it was shelter in place. There was a lot of fear. So we combined our vaccination efforts and make sure that the messaging, that the opportunities were there to help provide support to the community with assistance centers. So we walked the families through the census, how to fill it out, answered their questions, and then we went and made sure that they were able to fill that out because the digital literacy in the Latino community is not as high as the general population. So we knew there was the double challenge. So I could go on for a lot longer, but I think my time is up. But I do just want to say that I think the important part of this work, obviously couldn't have been made possible without not only the infrastructure, but also the investment of partners like the Latino Community Foundation, who helped take that investment to make sure that we were able to not only hire a staff organizer, but provide stipends to our promotoras. And so those were the important elements to ensuring that this count was successful.
Thank you, Diane, and for everything that Youth Alliance has done to contribute to a fair and accurate count, and all the work that I know that y'all are doing. And that last point, Don, that Diane made about organizations and what they need. I mean, you and Cerna have been leaders in terms of helping to make sure that we get the census right. I just wanted to ask if you could talk to us about why the census has mattered to Cerna, and what role you see philanthropy playing again in 2030 to make sure that we get a fair and accurate count. And what's your message to philanthropy in terms of the role that they should play?
Thanks for the question, and thanks for inviting me to participate. I am happy to note that the Cerna Foundation has been a strong supporter of efforts to ensure a fair and accurate census. In fact, supporting those efforts in 2020 for the 2020 census was one of the first things I prioritized when I came to Cerna in 2018. And I've been doing this for a while now. I previously worked at the Ford Foundation, and we worked on the 2010 census. And one thing that we have learned every time when foundations get together and support these types of efforts is that you can't start early enough. Right now, we're talking about Census 2030, but we committed seven-figure grants to the census effort back in 2021, and because we knew that every time we draw lessons from our experience working on census, one of the conclusions is, hey, we should have started earlier. We should have built the infrastructure earlier. We should have, as Robert said earlier, building those trusting community relationships takes time, and it's so important. And having that infrastructure in place ahead of time is really critical. So, and I think the logic is so bulletproof. Every foundation should support these types of efforts. Because after all, the role of foundations, our whole raison d'etre, and the nonprofits we support, of course, is to deliver benefits to people and communities that are in need. And that includes creating more educational opportunities, stimulating job creation, improving health outcomes, you name it. These are the types of things that we are here to do. And we do it in partnership with government agencies and business leaders and so many other partners. But we can't do it effectively unless we have a fair and accurate census. And, as my fellow panelists have pointed out, an accurate census doesn't just happen. Certain populations are chronically undercounted, including Latinos, other people of color, young people, and we can all definitely do better. So it really is a critical thing that foundations should support in our own direct interests and for the benefit of society. And I'll finally note that we all come to the census for different reasons, different geographies, different missions, different philanthropic purposes and whatnot. And fortunately, the census is a nonpartisan issue. It's not conservative or liberal or anything else. It's a constitutional requirement, and it forms the basis for a functioning democracy and our ability to very effectively deploy scarce resources to meet people's needs. So the logic to me and the rationale is so strong, and I continue to encourage more foundations to get involved and support these efforts.
Yeah, and thanks for that, Don. And as you say, I mean, for the early work that you and Cerna have done, and the investments that y'all have made in helping to make sure that communities that are routinely undercounted are actually counted. And I also like, what you said, which is true. Like this is not partisan. It's not a liberal or conservative. And yet, we both know, and this is the question that I want to ask to Maya, that it's under attack, that a fair and accurate count, and this isn't the first time, but that we really do see in this cycle some issues that seem to make it harder if they come to pass to get a fair count. And Maya, thank you for joining us. I know you're one of the busiest people out there in DC these days with everything going on in terms of our civil rights and protecting them. But I wanted to ask you um, about the Leadership Conference's work and what y'all are looking at right now when it comes to the census and making sure that everybody gets counted. When we think about what's happening on immigration, when we think about what's happening in peeling back many of the gains of the civil rights movement right now, how does this census fit into everything that we're seeing, and how can we best approach it? What is the Leadership Conference doing on it?
Well, thank you, Julian, and thank you for having me. It's a real privilege to be here, both with you. I, cannot start these remarks without remembering your incredible leadership at HUD and how we use the census to try to get more broadband access to communities of color. And it was the incredible interconnection of your leadership and role and work that many of us got to do. And, Robert Santos, we miss you so much in government. Let me just say that. And Diane Ortiz, we can't do it without local community. And that's one of the lessons of the civil rights movement and of our national policy work. And Don Chen has just been a leader and a colleague and an incredibly strategic partner for a lot of years now. So that's the good news. There's all of us, and that's what coalition is. But look, here's the way to understand the attack on the census, because I completely agree with what everyone has said about the fact that this is a nonpartisan issue. Except the truth is there are partisan players making it a partisan issue, even when it is not. And the reason that we have seen this attack, we should be really clear about. It is because, the census is power. And it's power for people. It's power around where and how local election districts get drawn in states. But it's also the power of the purse string in terms of where funds go and where there's an identification of problem or need and how it gets met. But it's also power because it gives us a voice. And in a democracy that's supposed to be a multiracial democracy, that's supposed to be an inclusive one, that it's supposed to allow everyone to have their own identity and to be seen and to be valued. If you want to control rather than create coalition, and if you want to have power rather than problem solving, one of the things that we saw in Project 2025, remember this was the blueprint from the Heritage Foundation that thought about what a next president could do to garner power for particular viewpoints, it put the census squarely in the crosshairs because there was an analysis that if you made it harder for some communities to count, you could actually draw maps that were not fair to that power. And that often meant communities of color. And that is what we're seeing playing out. We had that in the first census fight about whether a citizenship question would be asked, which got raised for 2020, and which we're going to continue to battle. But it was because, and this is why we spend so much time focused on it, it was because there were political strategists that said, this can work to our political advantage for our party. So even though the census benefits everyone, it has been seen as too much power for people who are Latino, for people who are African American, for people who are Native American, and that there's a way to take that power even when it hurts everyone. So I'm saying that because, we have really seen this as a fight for a multiracial democracy, a fight where we can all belong, a fight where we're all valued, no matter our country of origin, no matter our status, and where we can understand what the needs of communities are, but also what the voice of communities are. So we're spending a lot of time on kind of the three heads of the monster that is coming for our power. So one is, of course, the citizenship question. We're going to continue to fight it, but we're going to continue to work to make sure people feel their power and why their power matters. But it's also, it's gotten a little bit more money, but we're still deeply underfunded. Robert Santos already spoke eloquently to that. But that is a significant attack when you have so many people who are suffering. So more to say on that, more to say how they're trying to use the Postal Service, which is also in danger of bankruptcy rather than enumerators. Lots of attacks, but our view is power matters, coalition matters, and we're going to win this.
And Maya, and thank you for just going through the different challenges that we have seen last time that we're sure to see this time. And I want to pick up on that. And I'll start again with Robert, but this is a question really for everybody, and we can just go in the same order. But look, for Latino communities and other communities, Asian American communities, African American communities, and so forth, this issue of data privacy has raised its head as a severe one, given the overzealous ICE enforcement activity, the turning over of data from one agency to another, including attempts at turning over things like IRS data. One of the reasons that people can have more confidence or could have more confidence in their data being used for the census and willingness to fill forms out is because we said, hey, this is only going to be used for this purpose. Robert, we're in a different climate now. And even if the courts are able to stop the worst of this, there's still an impression out there in the community. I guess this is a question for all of you. If you could speak to that and how we should be thinking about that and what we can do to prepare to overcome that kind of challenge. I'm sure in the courts, but then also if it rears itself, what do we do?
Yeah, well, thank you for that question. It gets to the core of how do you get full participation in the census. When people mistrust government, they're not going to participate. Uh, Interestingly, I have and I've always had, because I know the Census Bureau for many years. I've always had full confidence in the confidentiality of the data that's collected from individuals that goes to the census, be it a survey, be it a census, or whatever. Title 13 protects that. And unlike Social Security Administration, unlike the Internal Revenue Service, unlike DHS, the Census Bureau does not have an enforcement function in its mission. It has a data collection and distribution of results mission that benefits the public. That I think is really key. Unfortunately, and I totally understand it. I totally understand it because going out and doing community engagement, I heard this over and over again. People don't distinguish between Census Bureau versus DHS versus it's all the federal government. And so I think the key to gaining trust for the decennial census will be to get at the local community agents or community levels, trusted messengers to help folks understand that the data that's being collected for the decennial census is very different and has different protections than data from other sources. That's a hard sell, I totally admit, but it's the truth. And I think to the extent that we can deliver that message, I think that it can be effective.
And Diane, same question. I mean, you are, and Youth Alliance is one of those trusted messengers. How do you see this?
Yeah, this is something we talked about and have been talking about with our team. We provide coordination with the rapid response support for the immigrant community. And it is an ongoing concern, just the confidentiality and privacy and just real safety for our community. We know that attacks are happening and are very targeted. And there's flock cameras and AI recognition and lots of data concerns in our community overall. I think when I met with our team and some of our young people, it was this feeling of, we had the same very real concerns back in 2019, 2020 with data and the privacy and citizenship question. And the intention is to bring chaos and confusion so that we'll have people that don't feel like they're able to trust to participate. And that's the goal, right? Is to make sure that we are invisible and undercounted. But I think like Robert mentioned, is that the trusted messengers plays a really important role in this because it's a human person-to-person connection. It is a real opportunity to have a deep dialogue about their fears and their concerns. Some of the trusted messengers that we leaned into back then and still do now are like the Mexican consulate, immigration attorneys during Know Your Rights presentations, other folks, young people helping to explain what some of the issues are and what the data looks like, and then reiterating this national message and this consistent messaging about it being confidential, not tied to immigration, whatever it is that we're able to really say, but validate that the fear is real, that there is, there's valid reasons for concern, but to give them an informed decision about the results if we don't participate. What happens if we are unable to really provide those resources in the community, our power? And then it's really, I think, about creating those safe spaces again to help provide that deep connection with folks to be able to help to fill that out and to come in and reduce that fear, provide that support, clarify any confusion. Those are the things that'll prohibit people and stop people from participating. So I do think that those are real concerns. But I think with the right messaging and ensuring that we're able to really focus on that value, the consistency about the future and investing in our future, that we can make some significant gains with it.
Don?
Yes, thank you. Well, many of us know that the country provides very strong legal protections regarding confidentiality regarding the census, but as many have noted during this webinar, every census has its challenges, and this decennial census is likely to face an unprecedented confluence of difficulties. And I won't repeat them here, but we saw some of that last time around, and we're likely to see that again. But as I mentioned, the foundations and a wide range of partners have learned a lot of lessons from different census cycles and the annual American Community Survey, and we have adjusted accordingly in anticipation for upcoming challenges. The group of funders that I work with is called the Census Funder Collaborative, and we've built an amazing infrastructure, but it does need additional and sustained resources now. So, it is great that we have a workable plan of action that has benefited from the lessons that we've learned over time, and some of it has been technical, some legal, some methodological. A lot of it, and in fact, a big bulk of it, is working with community organizations to build the trust, to have those trusted messengers and partners and credible people in communities, to educate people about the importance of the census. And again, that takes time. And so, but the infrastructure is largely built in a very strong way and needs resources. What makes me optimistic is that there is an enormous amount of energy within the nonprofit and philanthropic communities to engage in this. And I hope we can all tap into and channel that civic community and neighborly energy into a fair and accurate census and all of the beneficial resources and community power that will flow from that.
Yeah, it does seem, Don, in this world we live in today where, everybody's on their devices and it seems like it's so individualized, but the census is still something that so many people in each of our communities, right, has experience with. And the longer you've been around, I suppose, the more experience you have with it. But it's a great point. There is, sort of an infrastructure within the community, and then, as you say, an infrastructure of support for organizations that are out there on the ground. And Maya, when it comes to this issue of data privacy, and then you also mentioned, for instance, the citizenship question that was staved off last time, what does the fight look like right now? What is the state of the fight, of the pushback?
Well, I mean, first of all, I want to agree with everything everyone has said, because part of the state of the fight and the pushback is to ensure that people both are heard on their fears and their fears are acknowledged, but also that they know the benefits of participating. Both those things are critical, but also to know that there's a huge amount of fighting to ensure the protection of privacy rights, and that is incumbent upon all of us. And so, truth be told, there is a lot of bipartisan support for privacy in this country, meaning people who vote, people who show up, care a lot about it across the political spectrum. And that has really created room to demand and ensure privacy across the board in many different contexts. But our Center for Civil Rights and Technology, along with our Census team and the coalition, all partners and all of those things, are actually working very close together, making sure we're keeping the privacy rights fight not just alive, but moving forward, and that people know they have protections, to everyone's point. So we really do have an opportunity here to continue that drumbeat.
Absolutely. And I have a question for the group, but just to dovetail on this really briefly, Robert, one of the things that strikes me, and I know that other people have, given some thought to, is look, there's going to be a new administration in place in 2030 when the count actually happens. Could you just really briefly walk us through what are the ramifications if you have an administration that has a different viewpoint than the current one in office versus one that is consistent with this administration? Like what difference might it make? How much could the gears of the 2030 census be changed come January of 2029 into the actual counting process of 2030, or how much of it will already be baked in place?
You're on mute.
Oh, is Robert on mute?
Yeah, Robert, you're on mute.
So sorry.
Oh, no.
I'm technologically challenged here, guys. It's a really fascinating question because one way or the other, one of those two realities is going to occur. Either we're going to be under a different type of administration or we're going to have more of the same. If we have more of the same, there will be additional challenges and there will be a fight to the bitter end to try to get as much mitigation of the damaging types of policies like reduced budgets, cutting back preparations, and so forth, and even limiting the type of partnerships with communities that can occur between the Census Bureau and the people, so to speak. That's already occurring. There's a letter out by a representative or someone, Jim Jordan, who basically has challenged the Census Bureau to prove that its partnerships will be with community organizations that are nonpartisan, whatever that, or non-political. I'm sorry, non-political. And, in this day and age when everything's political, that's going to be a challenge. So there will be a continued effort, there should be a continued effort to batten the hatches, to mitigate, to do the normal due diligence in terms of, Congress people and letter writing and support that has to keep on occurring regardless of what happens. If the administration changes, my first reaction was going to be, well, this is such a large process. It's like trying to turn an aircraft carrier, in a heartbeat. However, in 2020, the Census Bureau on a dime reimagined its approach to how to do a census in the midst of the COVID pandemic. So I have a lot of hope and expectation that if the administration changes, that with an infusion of additional resources and a bolstering of technical staff, that there could be some real substantive changes in how the operational plan of the decennial census to maybe bolster and create a more robust partnership program. Because my bottom line is that you have to have community engagement and buy-in from the people. Otherwise, it doesn't matter, what type of letter you send, whether it's a big letter or a small envelope, or what type of online capability. You have to have that community level engagement. And by the way, you do have to have different languages allowed to participate. So I think there are strategies in each.
Yeah, and the point you made about really being prepared for either one of those eventualities. One of them is going to happen. Either you're going to have an administration that may well try and change things around come early 2029. You made a great point about the pandemic, and if they've done it before, in theory, they could do it again, right? Change on a dime.
But see, there's one other thing that is really, really critical, and that is here is something that we can do regardless of any administration, whether administration is trying to dampen the ability to do an accurate census or trying to help it. The one thing that we all can do is work together to create a more engaged process with communities. That can be done separately, regardless of whether there's a census partnership program or not. I employ the census stakeholders that this is something we can do regardless of what's going on in Washington. And it's something we need to do, especially as a Latino community, because we've been undercounted for so long. We have got to get our community level engagement going.
Well, and I want to ask, my last question is to be for everybody to ask about, or to just answer sort of what your organization is doing right now and what your best piece of advice to everyone would be to be as prepared as possible. Like, what should people be doing right now? But just briefly, first, I wanted to ask, look, we started this conversation off by noting how much the count matters to things like education funding, transit funding, to healthcare opportunity and healthcare outcomes and quality of life. And maybe we could start with Diane. Just if you could speak to that, to the importance that you've seen of the results of the census.
Well, I just have so much going on in my head right now. I think the one thing I have to say is that the census, is pivotal to our community, especially in an under-resourced area like ours. Like undercounting 10 people, results in thousands, millions of dollars of impact in our community, and it will impact our ability to be our power in this time. But I just have to say that I think the reality is that even nonprofits are being targeted and politicized, and worked as terror organizations or named as that. We're in a very different time, although we're still in it. We are echoing the same kind of like level of crisis as 2019, 2020. Now, the time for ensuring that local community organizations are properly receiving the investment that they need to continue and sustain this work is extremely critical. Because during the pandemic, there was this outpouring of philanthropic support that came in to help communities with vaccinations, with the census, with other protective resources. Now it hasn't been the same response when it's come with these immigration attacks and different things that are happening in our local communities. And there is a lot of burnout, and I worry about the burnout happening within our staff and within our community members, because they're dealing with the economic pressures, with the instability of housing. There is a lot of crisis, fears and happening in our community, a lot of stuff going on. Plus, then you have this layer of social division the rhetoric, the rumors, this constant attack on what's real, what's not real. Even our young people are saying that. I don't know how to tell the truth, what's true and what's not. So I think for us right now, how we've been preparing for the census and really working with community is helping to create beloved community with our folks and to reimagine how we're going to distribute this model of organizing and power. We know we're not going to staff our way out of this. Doesn't mean we don't need staff and we don't need coordination, because we do, because it has to be targeted. We need that data. We need to know the census tracts. We need to be able to have those stipends for our folks because they earned it. They deserve to have that. But I do think that there is an important realization that I really like to uplift here, is that if we're saying that those trusted messengers are really critical to the success of the census out campaign and to just democracy in general, it has to be invested in, and those pipelines of leadership development, of community care, of cross collaboration, multiple collaboration across issues, not keeping it just census, immigration, this or that. It has to come together so that we have a collective movement and a collective strategy to really uplift this issue. So, I just want to say that I think making this movement irresistible, making it full of culture, care, and concern and love is how we're going to win. It's how we're going to keep our communities safe. It's how we're going to keep this investment local to the families, to the children, to our future. So, I thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And Don, related to that, just how do you see this work, this census work, along with the other investments that Cerdna makes? You sort of alluded to that earlier, but I connect the dots for us, if you will, of how intertwined issues of quality of life and economic mobility are with this count.
Yeah, well, as I often say to anyone who will listen, if you look at the work of so many foundations, the vast majority of foundations that are really here for a charitable purpose, and many of us are also focused on supporting positive change. And positive change and delivering benefits to communities really requires understanding our communities really well. It also is all of our grant making strategies are predicated on an assumption of a functioning democracy, one that folks can rely on, one that has norms and practices that have been upheld and honored and strengthened, hopefully, for years and decades to come. So those are really fundamental. And as I think about the role of foundations and the nonprofits that we work with during this time, the one thing I'll note is that we are ready. We collectively as a society may not win on every issue in every battle, but we are more prepared than ever. And I'll just reiterate an earlier point, which is that it's never too early to start funding these efforts and get involved and get ready, because our communities need to be ready when the folks start fanning out into different neighborhoods and then all the electronic submissions and everything. Our communities need to be ready. Diane referenced this as well. Our political environment has become terribly polarized. But I'll say again, ensuring a fair and full, accurate census is completely nonpartisan, and it continues to be so, so important. For those of you who are contributing to the Latino Community Foundation, I would say contribute more. And Julian didn't ask me to say that. Or if you have your own foundations, or if you're individual donors, the time to support these efforts is now, or even yesterday, if you have a time machine. For those interested in participating in the Nonpartisan Census Funders Collaborative, I'll leave the information for that with the good people at the Latino Community Foundation so you can get in touch. I guess the last thing I'll say is something that I often hear from skeptics or folks who don't feel the urgency, which is that, hey, don't in January 2029, aren't we going to have a different president? And to that, I say probably. But even if we have a new president who also cares about an accurate census, we can't build everything then. We need to get ready now. We got to be ready to push the go button whenever challenges arise, and they will arise in the lead up to the census taking that occurs. It's no surprise that the census was one of the first things our nation's founders mandated 250 years ago. And hopefully these current efforts to undermine an accurate census will be temporary. But in the meantime, we got to keep building our strong democracy muscles to ensure that we do this well for the benefit of our multiracial democracy and for future generations of Americans.
Thanks for that, Don. And Maya, I know that we have just a couple of minutes left, and so maybe I'll just start with and ask for just a short reflection, Maya, on your best advice for people who are on the Zoom, from organizations, whether they're foundations, whether they're nonprofits that are doing the work on the ground. What's your best piece of advice right now? And then I'll ask everybody just a few seconds on that.
Look, do anything you can. Just don't stop doing. I mean, I think all of the challenges and issues that are being raised, including in the chat, yes, they're real, but we have so much more power than we think, and everything we do right now matters. And that's everything from the local update of census addresses, that's making sure to demand and ask from the federal government, state government, and local government the resources to ensure that we have trusted people in communities, making sure people know and understand the census and how to utilize it and why it matters. And don't forget, I mean, there are resources available as well. You can go to censusroadmap.org, which is where we have resources available to help support the work. And we're convening to things around how to solve some of these problems as they come up. So all I can say is it all matters. Don't stop.
That's great advice. Robert?
My advice will be pretty simple. I am a big believer that we can't have a successful census without deep, deep community engagement. But it also means that it's not enough to say, here I am, here's what I'm going to do. We need to share information with each other. We need to help each other. So a huge component in all of this is making sure that at every level, so like it's national organizations, state level organizations, regional, local, within a city, neighborhood, rural, we all share information and work with each other, because that's going to, I think, really going to make the difference.
Terrific. Diane? Your best piece of advice to folks out there watching.
Connect with other folks. Don't be siloed. Don't try to take it on all by yourself. Take a piece of what you can, work together, be smart, strategic, and work with our young people. They are ready to go, and they want to participate.
I like that. That's right. Young people, key to all of this. And Don.
Yeah, ditto to all that. I would say more funding, more coordination sooner.
All right, well said. I want to thank you for joining us, and thank you for all of the efforts that I know are being undertaken by so many people joining us on the Zoom. The Latino Community Foundation is proud to partner with organizations like Youth Alliance and so many others throughout California, and looking forward to continuing the work toward the 2030 census. I want to thank all of our panelists, especially again for taking time today and for lending their insight. And what I heard was it's never too early. We need to be doing the work to organize, collaborate, connect, and make sure that we have a fair and accurate count that benefits all of us in 2030. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.